Hello everybody, welcome into the Hobby Bar. This is Jason and welcome. Today we'll be working on this Reaper Gossamer Air Sorceress that I've had sitting around for a while. She's just primed up in Citadel Corax White. I used the spray on her. And yeah, we'll be getting going with sort of a maybe different color scheme on it. I wanted to use red for the dress part. Kind of wanted green for the cloak because I was going to use the Vallejo Malefic Flesh paints on her skin, since I haven't really gotten to use those very much. So go ahead and get some of this Citadel Khorne Red down, since I want to use that for her dress part. It is pretty much on its last legs. I'm gonna have to get a new Khorne Red or just solid red base coating paint here in a little while. Go ahead and add some Lamian Medium to it though, just to make sure it flows well. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get her dress base coated. I'm also going to be working on base coats other than her skin. I want her skin to be pretty much done. I did have to mute the audio on this one because I think I had the ring light a little too close or something, because when I was shaking the table just by painting and doing the hobby, either the lamp was bumping into the camera mount or something, because there was a lot of reverberation happening. So no audio from the painting side, it'll just be voice and music sounding. So I wanted to apologize about that, and we'll catch back up here shortly when we move on to the start of the cloak, the greens. Let's catch up with y'all in a little bit. so we're gonna come in here with some Citadel Castellan Green. It's more of a camo cloak, or camo olive drab sort of green, than like just a bright, sharp green. I think Caliban green would be their standard green versus like this being an olive drab. Figured it can be a bit olive drab because I noticed on the back there's some leaves. It looks like it doesn't quite look like fur, it actually just looks like leaves. So I was thinking, hey, maybe I can use the olive drab sort of color for the cloak, but I didn't want to do a different color on both sides, so we'll go with the green on both sides. It takes a little bit, but we'll go ahead and get that done, and then move on to the next color. Alrighty, now we're going to be getting into the Vallejo colors. This is going to be a process going back and forth between them quite a bit, so it's going to be hard for me to just show one color at a time on the screen. But we're going to start out with some frozen flesh. Sort of a slightly purplish tint. It's not quite as purple-hued as Purple Shadow, as they call it, but it's a nice color. I would say probably Citadel Demonette Hide might be a close one in color, because it's sort of that purplish gray. But I'm gonna go ahead and put this around the eyes, below her chin. I'm just gonna target this where I want there to be a deeper color, more of a shadowy color. I'm not just gonna put it all over her skin. And then we're gonna start adding other colors onto the palette, mixing some a bit, just to sort of get a slight blend going. It's kind of hard for me to blend right now. I don't really have a humidifier running, and it's really dry, so paint's dry super fast. It's much easier to dry brush here than wet blend. Alrighty, so now you'll notice I'm adding in some of the next color, some cold flesh, onto the wet palette, and drawing some of the color out and mixing it in with some of the frozen flesh. This way I can sort of get a transition color between them, because it's kind of a drastic shift between them. If frozen flesh were akin to Demonette Hide, I would say cold flesh is more akin to Slaanesh Gray. For their layer paint. So it's a pretty drastic jump from sort of this deep purple gray to a light purple gray. Like, it's pretty steep step, so I wanted to get an in-between color and mix those together. After that, I do use a little bit of just the cold gray, or cold flesh in some areas, just to sort of finish out where I'm going with the color. Then we'll move on to the other colors, so I'll catch up at the end a little bit, where we'll add the next color on the palette. So right now we're adding on some pale flesh onto the palette. All these colors are, again, part of Vallejo's Malefic Flesh set. I wanted to give it a shot because I kind of want to do purple flesh tones a little better. And I also wanted to branch out in other companies, try out their paints a bit, see how they compare. Been kind of enjoying these a bit more as I've learned to use them, so we'll keep on trying and experimenting. But for this pale flesh, I mixed in a bit of the cold flesh paint on the palette, just to shift it towards a bit of the purple and not make it a super drastic shift into like that more pure grayish tone of skin. I still want it to stay a bit purple and purplish tone for her skin. Alrighty, now we're on to adding the final color onto the palette for the skin, which is going to be Vallejo White Flesh. It is more of a pinkish white, as expected for a flesh tone, but I do want to keep it still purple. I don't want it to be super stark highlight for the flesh, so I do mix in a bit more cold flesh into it and go from there for these highlights. It takes a little bit of time, but overall I'm pretty happy with how this model turned out versus my previous attempt at using these Fantasy Pro paints from Vallejo. So I think just a little more experimentation and I'll be able to get it down to a point that I'm very happy with how I'm using them. So we'll go ahead and work on this. It does take me a little bit just to get all the highlights done all over here, but we'll be skipping through some of that again like I've been for most of this video. So I'll catch up with y'all when we move on to the leather base coat. Alright, for the leather base coating, we're going to go ahead and try just a normal method instead of contrast. So I'm getting some Citadel Rhinox Hide ready and onto the palette. And we'll go ahead and hit whatever that piece is called. It sort of wraps around her belly area. I want to say corset, but I don't think that's what it's technically called. And also, on one of her sleeves, it's very clear that there's like a leather armband around it. But it doesn't really look like there is one on the other one, though based on the art, it should be the same thing, but I can't really see the buttons on it, so I'll just leave it as a normal sleeve. I think it's a little more interesting if it's a little asymmetrical like that. I do feel like I should have also hit the tabard thing. It's going down, it's pretty decorated, but I have other ideas for what I want to do with that. So I'll go ahead and just base coat these two parts for the leather, and that'll be it for today's episode. We'll move on to the last call, and I'll catch up with y'all then. Alrighty, last call. So on this last call, I wanted to try something a bit different. Pop the camera out, bring it in on the model. Don't think the focus is quite right, but we'll figure that out as we go. Wanted to do a spin of the model just so you can see how she ended on this episode. And also, I wanted to bring in a previous model that I tried some of these paints on. This Daughter of Cain model from Underworlds. You can kind of see that the skin tone is a little bit not quite right. I'm not quite happy with how the skin tone blended out, but I also just sort of layered on paints instead of mixing them on the palette, so a little bit different. So, is what it is, learning experience as we all know. Anyway, that'll be it for today's episode, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.